I thank Dr. Srinivas and Nageshwar for this invitation. We are going to see an overview of techniques on catheter interventions in paravalvular leak. I would summarize on what we are going to talk. How common is paravalvular leak? If it is going to be very rare, it's not going to be relevant to talk about it. And if there is a paravalvular leak, how morbid is it? Is it truly a sickness? And if suppose surgical correction of a paravalvular leak is a very sensible option, how serious is a redo surgery? What are the advantages of a transcatheter route compared to redo surgery? What are the newer imaging modalities that help us? What we previously practiced is a fluorogate closure versus now an image-guided closure, antegrade versus retrograde techniques, and the newer techniques. How common is paravalvular leak? Around 1 to 5% of all MVRs and AVRs are going to have some sort of hemodynamically significant paravalvular leak. But if you do a transesophageal routinely, you may pick up as high as 20% in the first 1 month. It follows both mechanical and bioprosthetic. Now with increasing TAVIs, there are quite a lot of TAVI paravalvular leaks. Mitral is more common than aortic. The causes are basically improper suturing. Sometimes the suturing may be done in an area which is calcified and fibrosed part of the annulus, or very, very rarely it can be due to endocarditis. Endocarditis is, as a cause of paravalvular leak, is not a common reason. The presentation will be with heart failure, hemolytic anemia. It can be a predisposer for endocarditis and ventricular dysfunction. Many of these patients will have very elevated BNP levels. How morbid? When a conservative approach was taken on this paravalvular leak, on about 50% of the patients and another 50% of patients taken up for a redo surgery, they observed that there is operative mortality of around 6% and a late mortality of another 6%, put together a 12% mortality at the end of 5 years. But on conservative treatment, there was a 26% mortality, much, much higher than that. In fact, conservative treatment was adopted in patients who are not very anemic, who are in a better functional class. So even the so-called stable patients will die fast. In terms of actuarial survival at 1, 5, and 10 years, you can see that a large majority will survive if you are closing the paravalvular leak, whereas if you are adopting a conservative strategy, a majority of them will die. So there is a distinct advantage in closing a paravalvular leak. How morbid it is redo surgery? All redo surgeries carry around 12 to 14% risk. And another problem about paravalvular leak, it is the place of annular fibrosis and calcification which is causing the paravalvular leak. So you stitch it again, that area is sick, that area is unhealthy. So it's going to again result in another paravalvular leak. So if you have a first paravalvular leak and you do a redo surgery, 13% of them will have repeat paravalvular leak. You go in and close in second time. 35% of them will have a third paravalvular leak. So which means that area is not good enough, and so it will result in repeat paravalvular leaks again and again. Is catheter therapy desirous over surgery? Obviously, because even if the tissue is fibrosed and calcified, we can put in some devices. And it avoids the redo surgery morbidity substantially. But what is the problem? It's not a procedure as commonly done like how Biswajit was talking about ASDs or Nageshwar is talking about VSDs. It needs substantial operator understanding and operator experience. All the devices that we are using are off-label uses. If the paravalvular leak is obviously more than 20% of the circumference, it can never be closed by a transcatheter method. And paravalvular leaks can be crescentic, serpiginous. Different challenges can be offered by the anatomy. Let us talk about the imaging modalities. The old traditional modalities of the thoracic echo and transesophageal echo, we primarily concentrate on the shape of the jet, orientation of the jet, number of jets. Effect on LV, is the LV dilated, flow reversal. What I mean as flow reversal is there is an arch of the aorta or descending thoracic aorta's flow reversal in ARs, and is there a systolic flow reversal in the pulmonary veins in MRs. The newer imaging modalities are the 3D TE and multiphase gated CT. TE, we watch at same thing. This is a mitral bioprosthesis with an 8 mm paravalvular leak with substantial LA dilatation. Imaging nowadays with the newer transesophageal probes can be done in multiple planes, and this is biplane imaging. Now coming to three-dimensional transesophageal, it gives far precise localization, a orientation with the adjacent structures. Now the current 3D technology permits the measurement only with a grid. If, for example, this is the paravalvular leak, you have to see the dots here. Each of the dot is separated by 5 millimeters. And so roughly this is around 7 millimeter wide and around 3 millimeter in its width. So the current 3D technology does not permit an absolute measurement, but we can use with a grid. The newer technology is a multi-phase gated CT. It is something similar to the coronary CT. Around 16 to 20 phases are occurred in one cardiac cycle, and then you retrospectively ECG gate them and cyclically display. And then you can identify the paravalvular leaks. Technology is yet to come to India in a great manner as of today. Coming to fluoro guided approach versus image guided approach. The fluoro guided approach was the one that we traditionally started. What we used to do was, on a thoracic echocardiogram, we identify whether it is left or right or anterior or posterior, and then use an appropriate plane so that you can get the leak away from the plane of the prostatic valve. So you have now identified the paravalvular leak on one side of the prostatic valve. And of course, this will need multiple contrast injections because you have to do some test runs on different views. If suppose the valve leaflets are not visible at all, the fluoroscopic method is going to be challenging. For example, if you use a Chitra valve, the valve is not visible. Obviously, bioprosthetic valve is not visible. So these are all some of the issues on a fluoro-guided approach. The moment you have a fluoro-guided approach, after you cross the wire, after you profile the prostatic valve, you keep advancing your catheter inside and then pass a stiff wire and then advance a sheath, and then the job is done. Today what is followed is a 4D image guidance, which means a 3D echo, real time with time also. So this is the paravalvular leak which we are crossing with a wire. The advantage of using the transesophageal or a multi-slice CT scan is to identify whether it is feasible to close or not. As I told you earlier, if suppose the circumference of the paravalvular leak is going to be somewhere around 20%, obviously it's not going to be possible to close. So the feasibility of closure, identify multiple defects. You can see one defect at 6 o'clock and one defect at 10 o'clock, both crossed with a wire. These are all going to be very, very difficult if you are going to use only a fluoro-guided approach. We understand the anatomy better, and we also understood that if there is a very crescentic device, we cannot close always with one device. We have to parallelly cross with 2 wires, 2 sheets, and put 2 parallel devices, so that the 2 devices sit on either side. Now, this is about feasibility. This is an aortic prosthesis. You can see that there is a large paravalvular leak. This is a 21 millimeter valve, and this is a 20 millimeter paravalvular leak. So when such a large paravalvular leaks are clearly visualized on a 3D echo, we will know the difficulties that we will face when we are doing the procedure. So is it going to be feasible? On the contrary, if you are going to have a picture like this is a 27 millimeter bioprosthetic mitral valve and a small 6 millimeter paravalvular leak here. So then we can say, okay, definitely this is approachable. So a 3D echo gives a far better perspective about the feasibility, the number of defects. Coming to antegrade versus retrograde. For a mitral paravalvular leak, this is the mitral valve and there is a paravalvular leak. If you are going to cross from the atria to ventricle, it is antegrade. If you are going to cross from ventricle to atria, it is retrograde. It is the way in which you are crossing the defect, your guide wire crosses. Ultimately, all the mitral valve leaks will be closed only from the atria. But it is the way how your guide wire first passes. Antegrade means you cross from LA to LV, and retrograde means from LV to LA. The same thing in aorta. Aortic paravalvular leak, if you are going to cross from aorta, it's retrograde. If you are going to enter from the LV, it's going to be antegrade. We'll come to it a little later. Mitral retrograde technique is one of the commonly deployed method. This is an aortic catheter, Judkins left coronary catheter. We advance it. Initially the guide wire crosses and then the catheter also enters. The Judkins left has gone into this aneurysmal huge left atrium, and you are having the whole wire floating in the left atrium. You have made a transeptal puncture through which a directable some catheter, this is a Judkins right, and you pass a snare and catch this wire and proceed with the technique. Whenever the left atrium is extremely aneurysmal, in a large left atrium, the prostatic valve is going to be very small. And so in these patients, retrograde technique alone will work. Antegrade technique will be very technically be challenged. The moment you cross, then this is snaring. You can see the snare end here. And you have put a muscular VSD device, a large muscular VSD device on a Jauch-Shelley prosthesis. Antegrade mitral technique is challenging. If the atria is very small, probably it is easier. But most of these patients with a chronic mitral valve disease who have got a mitral prosthesis will have aneurysmal left atrium. And it's not going to be easy to fish in a small dot. It is like, a shooter trying to hit the bullseye. he will have plenty of rings all around, and so his wire will go into any chamber. So what is there to help us? There are directable catheters. You can use Judkins right or Amplatz left. You have deflectable guide wires like Cook's deflectable guide wires. You have deflectable sheets. St. Jude has got an Agilish 8 French delivery system. Lifetech has got a Fustar deflectable sheet which comes in various sizes also. So if you are going to choose an antigrade pathway, you can use one of these, either the deflectable guide wires or the deflectable sheets. Why is always retrograde simpler than antigrade in a mitral paravalvular leak? Imagine that this is the prosthetic valve. You are having a small dot and you have to cross it, and you have an atria of around 8 centimeters. On the contrary, this is the ventricular view. You are seeing the ventricular view of the same bioprosthesis. You see the dot of paravalvular leak here. This is actually like a crevice. The whole of the ventricle converges towards the mitral annulus. So you pass a valve, the valve is going to be deflected by all the ventricular valves towards that crevice. And so the guide wire, it's quite easy to enter retrograde. So retrograde is the most sensible method to cross a mitral paravalvular leak if you are having a dilated atria. Aorta, always it is retrograde only. You have to cross from the aorta, enter inside. So this is the aortic bileaflet St. Jude valve, a paravalvular leak at around 2 to 3 o'clock position, and this is the guide wire that is entering through the aortic paravalvular leak. And once you are inside, put a sheath inside and then put a device. So the moment you are able to cross, then that means half of the job is done. How to size a paravalvular leak? We have to understand that all these defects are invariably having 2 different dimensions. So if this is on 3D, a transverse plane dimension and a vertical plane dimension, by 2D you will never be able to achieve these dimensions. So it's imperative that 3D technology is used for identifying what is the size of this device. Does that mean we were never doing such a thing in the past? Previously we used to adopt techniques which are more primitive. Pass a balloon across and then try to size it. This is a sizing balloon that is going through, and we used to size it. But now in the present 3D era, the whole of the sizing is done by 3D using 3D grid mapping. So identify the left end and the right end of the device, and then freeze the frame, put the grid, and you can see this end to that end. You see that there are almost around 4 dots, which means 20 millimeter sized paravalvular leak. So the sizing is today done entirely on a 3D or 4D images, which is the ideal device. All the devices are off-label. Nobody has manufactured a device meant for a paravalvular leak. Each of the defect is different. This is a round defect. This is a oval defect. This is a very, very crescentic defect. So you cannot manufacture a device that is custom made for all the paravalvular leaks. Any of these devices have been tried. ASD, PFO, vascular plugs 1, 2, 3, muscular VSD, ADO1. The largest experience throughout is with the ADO1 and muscular VSD device. I personally have used more of muscular VSD devices. AVP2 and AVP3 are relatively new entrants. Let me talk just about AVP3 for a slide. AVP3 has been customized for a paravalvular leak. It has got 2 dimensions. One is the transverse dimension and one is the vertical dimension. It is meant to fit into a oval or a crescentic shaped structure. But we need to imagine that in the body, when the device is trying to position itself, even though it is quite common and logical for us to think that the device will take this particular shape in alignment with the paravalvular leak, most often in practical use it does not happen. AVP3 of this dimension will go and sit perpendicularly across a crescentic defect, thereby resulting in permanent residual flows. So one of the methods that is followed even when using the AVP3 will be passing 2 or 3 wires simultaneously through the defect, 2 or 3 sheets through, and then put 2 or 3 parallel devices, one adjacent to each other, so that all the devices sit next to each other and abolish a crescentic or a oval shaped defect. Whenever there are multiple defects, this is an example of a patient who is having an anterior large defect and on the side at around 9 o'clock another defect. We have to cross simultaneously. I think we saw this picture previously, and we have to put devices simultaneously. This also we saw previously. Once again, we were talking about why retrograde is simpler than the antigrade sometime before. Whenever we are approaching from the left ventricle in a paravalvular leak, it's going to be more sensible because we have a crevice on which we can advance the guide wire. But to pass from the left ventricle, we need to take the arterial catheter all the way through the aorta and try to manipulate it in the left ventricle to get a wire position. So far more sensible than that will be to go directly from the apex. The TAVI, which started as a transcatheter procedure, is primarily today a transapical procedure.
So similarly, going by the same logic, if you are able to advance a small sheath from the left ventricular apex, we will be directly on target. We can pass a wire through the paravalvular leak, get it snared in the left atrium after an intraatrial puncture and finish the job. So this is basically a hybrid surgery. A transapical access is taken by a limited anterolateral thoracotomy and a perventricular placement of the sheath. Paravalvular leak is crossed and then devised. The same thing can be done percutaneously also. This is a percutaneous approach. You can see the big plaster after the procedure. Percutaneously you gain an access, go into the left ventricle, put a device, and then as you are coming out, put an Amplatzer duct occluder 1 device to close the left ventricular rent that has been placed. This is being proposed by Dr. Carlos Ruiz from New York. And this makes the entire procedure totally CT guided. You plan the place of your puncture, everything on the CT. This is important to avoid injuring and hitting the left anterior descending coronary artery, going through the left pleura, left lung, which will cause pneumothorax or hemothorax. So you need to plan the whole procedure based on CT images. So I will again summarize what I started with. Paravalvular leak is common. It occurs in 1 to 5% of patients with significant morbidity. It is always good to close a paravalvular leak because medical follow-up of a paravalvular leak carries far higher mortality. There is an advantage of transcatheter closure compared to surgery in terms of morbidity. If we are using the newer imaging modalities, we are making the procedure more and more reproducible and more achievable. We started off with fluoro-guided approach, but now we are slowly moving towards image-guided closure. We should know that antegrade closure in a mitral prosthesis is going to be pretty difficult, and retrograde closure is the most sensible method. If we probably get all the newer modalities like CT scan, we can also start using transapical approach, like percutaneous transapical punctures. In the alternative, a small left anterolateral thoracotomy by the surgeon and doing it as a hybrid procedure will make more sense. And probably in another decade or so, more and more paravalvular leaks are going to be dealt with in hybrid cath labs or by transapical approaches. Once again, an invitation for all of you to come to our meeting on October 4 to 7, the PCSI's annual conference. Thank you.
Shiva, just one question. Since now that you have accumulated an experience of paravalvular leak closure, what has been your result in the intermediate term? Long term is an inappropriate question.
Among the paravalvular leaks that I have closed, one of the patient has had a redo surgery about 2 years later due to a persistent paravalvular leak, which continued to cause hemolysis. All the other patients, as of today, have not needed any re-interventions, and their heart association status, the anemia, everything is far better. One of them had to go for a redo surgery. That was the Jock-Shelley prosthesis that we showed. She continued to have a leak, and she continued to have anemia primarily. So we had to go for a redo surgery.